It's great to have you here and wonderful to have everyone here today. This is the second of 3 different events that we are doing to really give you an overview of how the Minneapolis Foundation uses the dollars we completely control. We do equity and justice work in 3 areas: in education, in economic mobility, and in the environment. That's what we do with the dollars we totally control. We also are the second oldest community foundation in the country. So what that means is that individuals have funds with us. Some of you are here today. Those individuals collectively put out about $100 million a year into this community. They make choices that they recommend to us that we carry forward. But it's important to recognize the fact that we don't sit in the IDS Center and decide where all the dollars go. We do feel it's really important for us to be a community of generosity. And what that means is we convene people around big issues and have them work together. No one person can solve everything in this community. We all need to work together. So we wanted you to get that overview. Now, there's nobody who likes to brag about Minneapolis and this region more than me. That being said, I want to say 3 things that I think are the absolute shame of our community. Number 1, there is almost no community in the United States of America where you can predict the likelihood of a child's success by looking at the color of their skin. That is a shame of this community. There is almost no other community in the United States of America where you can determine whether an entrepreneur will be successful or not by looking at the color of their skin, and that is a shame of this community. And many communities are like this one, where it is far more likely that people of color will be the ones who suffer the consequences of climate change much more than majority white cultures. These are the reasons why we do equity and justice in education, economic mobility, and environment. That's what we do for a living, and that's why we're here. It is also true that somebody who is coming out of incarceration has a more complicated path. And that is why this is such a success. This is one of the many, many things this foundation has helped invest in our economic development portfolio. It was really wonderful to drive down Lake Street and come by the Coliseum building down there, which was badly, badly burned after the destruction after George Floyd's murder. And now it is in the hands of a Black-led developer, Black investors, Black architect, first Black distillery. That's what we call reimagine. We did rebuilding, we did restoring, but we're really doing reimagine work. That work, as well as our environmental work and many others, has been overseen by a person who has gone under the radar for most people in this community, but has been one of the most transformational people that we have in the world of philanthropy and in community development. And that is the super humble person who I've just embarrassed the hell out of to my left, and it's Joanne Stately. How did I do in embarrassing you, Joanne? Go ahead. On a 10 on a 10 scale of embarrassment? Okay. However, it is really important. I just need to give you a super quick insight. In those really complicated hours and days and months after George Floyd's murder, and as we raised money, as we brought money in from the state, as we worked with others, Joanne from the minute was on the ground doing that work, but not just deciding where it went, but empowering community tables, working with nonprofit developers, hearing voices from the community on what was needed, and doing it. The same work she did when the Drake fire happened on a Christmas day, and immediately she was on the ground helping us do this work. She leads all of our work in that area on impact with Patrice Relaford, who is back here, and she leads our education work, our collective giving, and together they form a tag team better than anything you'll ever see on the WWF. It's an amazing team. So with that, I want to turn it over to a great hero of mine and the person who leads this work, Joanne Stately.
Yes, embarrassing, very embarrassing, as always. I said, these look like little tractor seats up here, so I'm going to try to get myself situated, make sure things are all covered up. And and then lose all my notes at the same time. Thank you. Well, I'd like to invite our panelists to come up here as I make a few comments before we begin. And no, I'm dropping that. Okay.
I'm here for you.
I'm glad. I need help. This isn't exactly. No, that's okay. That's okay. No. This is just fine. Well, thank you for joining us here today for this very, I think, hopefully an engaging discussion as we're talking about economic justice and economic mobility, all the things that RT had said about this work and how this work gets done in this community is going to give you an example of how through the Minneapolis Foundation and with you holding donor-advised funds helps to support some very important work. Again, being very mindful that, we're here a little over 4 years after the murder of George Floyd, and thinking about all the civil unrest and the things that have happened since that time. We are here today to kind of give you the opportunity to see some of the organizations and their work that really supports dealing with issues of inequities, unjust systems, and how we can create change. But before we get to our panelists, I also want to say I tried to do some homework. I am not a reporter, which Patrice and RT has, and also Tom that are here, that are very good at asking questions. That's not necessarily what I do naturally. And then when I look to say, how do you make a good moderator? Well, they say you should be that type of person, and that's not who I am. So I kind of failed on that mark. But we're not going to fail on who, when we bring experts and people that are on the ground and in community, are very much in proximity, which is one of our values, to help bring you closer to what these key issues look like. So with that, I'd like to introduce our panelists and also our host, and I'll start on that end with Emily. Emily is the founder and CEO of this fabulous place that's called All Square. And then we have Francisco, who is the executive director of Copal, and I'm not even going to try to attempt to say that in Spanish, so I'm glad it's Copal. And Rosemary, who's been involved with the Women's Foundation, or not Women's Foundation, with Women Venture, a longtime supporter and funder. All of these groups have been longtime partners in this work that we call economic justice, economic vitality, and economic mobility. And I think it's critical, and I'm going to ask the question, this is for each of them to respond to. But before I do that, I also want to recognize another staff person, which is Josh Johnson, here sitting in the front. Josh is our program officer who just closed and administered our last racial and economic justice grant round, which represented about $3.1 million to about 79 organizations in this last portfolio. He's been very critical to supporting this work and really appreciate him and serving in that role, and has that very face-to-face direct contact with all of our other partners and communities. So thank you, Josh. So I'm going to start, and I'm going to start first with Emily and then kind of come down. I think it's kind of important to kind of get this personal, kind of your own personal story of why this is of interest of your work and how that applies to the work that you do with All Square.
Why economic justice and mobility? Yeah, thanks for the question. For me personally, I have not experienced the criminal justice system or the prison system personally, as I have not lived through that system from that perspective. But as an attorney, I definitely was proximate to, one, just the systemic issue of mass incarceration, and especially the issue of equally as problematic what happens when folks come home. And how criminal records are haunting people. We have this extremely flawed system that we know has often motivated by racialized outcomes and processes. So we know the system is flawed, and we know that even when folks come home and have moved past a very flawed system, they're still being punished. I saw that personally as a federal attorney for the Department of Housing for over 5 years. People were filing complaints left and right saying I'm being discriminated against on the basis of having a criminal record. Like, I just want a place to live. And I knew that was happening in the private sector. I was not aware it was happening in the public sector under federally subsidized housing. And that was extremely concerning. I think the other thing I'll say, and then I'll stop, is just, it's one thing to learn about issues and to see them. It's another to meet and love the human beings behind the issues. So when I was in law school down in New Orleans, I was I was so lucky to have met and gotten to know and love the Angola Three, three members of the Black Panther Party who changed and transformed my life, who taught me about the issues that are happening as it relates to racism in America, but who also taught me the importance of humility, humanity, and resilience. And I think the last thing I'll say, and this kind of ties into our work today, is they also taught me that there's no one better equipped to learn the law than folks who are in prison, who have really lived the law. So I think it was meeting and knowing them and getting to see, like, wow, you are mastering the law in prison. I'm out here trying to master it in law school and in practice. And I think that experience and a human experience transformed my life and ultimately, hopefully, my contributions to trying to be part of the solution.
Francisco.
Can you repeat the question, please, again?
So one, just kind of your personal kind of perspective of why you're involved in this work and what does that work look like for your organization?
Sure. I'm Francisco Segovia. This is my neighborhood, by the way. And Senator Mohammed also represents me. So Longfellow has been my home for many, many years. I moved to Minnesota, or I came to Minnesota. I used to be citizen somewhere else, and then I became immigrant in 1990. And so Longfellow became home 1993. And so again, Francisco Segovia, I left my home country, El Salvador, 1990. The country was going through a civil war. Hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people end up living in El Salvador. I was one of them in the 1990s. And the other thing is that I became Latino as well. I didn't know that what Latino was until honestly someone was chasing me. I was at one store in Bloomington and someone chasing me, and I was like, "Why that person is following me here?" And I asked a friend, "Why do they follow me?" "Oh, it's because you are Latino." "And what is that supposed to mean?" "That you steal things." "Oh, okay, I didn't know that we steal things." So, but you know how, I mean, it's kind of funny in a way, but it's like stereotypes, right? How do we fit into something that we don't even know sometimes? This is how someone else describes who we are. And so from there, the idea about system change, like I said, my country went through a civil war. About 80,000 people died during the Civil War, 10,000 people disappearances. Many teachers, I'm a teacher by trade, many teachers, because of the union work that they were doing, were disappeared or murdered. But also the United States had a lot to do with it. And so when the idea of leaving home was not like, I want to make my luggage here, I want to leave home, I want to go to the airport. No, that was not opportunity for that. That's that story of many immigrants that we are forced to leave, right? So with my ex-wife and I, she was expecting. So we end up crossing borders, 3 borders, to finally made it into the U.S. My dream was to go to Canada because I have heard back home that Canada had a much friendlier policy about immigrants. Came to Minnesota because first I went to Florida, tough time in Florida, working hard, planting trees. Our son was born over there. Then a friend of mine said, "Hey, you know what? We're still going with this civil war in El Salvador. We need to help here in Minnesota because we need to keep teaching people about U.S. intervention in El Salvador." U.S. was putting $1 million a day in the war. When the civil war was over, no money for development. That's usually how it happens, right? And then I ended up here, but then I realized when I came here, now I am in the United States because in Florida I was able to speak Spanish, and here wasn't able to communicate. And so with that, I end up doing what I could, doing solidarity work, afraid of being arrested by the police because I didn't have papers. It feels like when you don't have documents, it feels like you are showing everyone that you have something on your forehead saying, I don't have papers, arrest me. I mean, obviously, no one was looking at me, but I felt that way. And, went through the process of going to school to learn English, to do survival jobs, eventually was able to get some papers, and then went to work for an organization, a nonprofit, where I stayed for many years until gathered with a few friends in 2017, and I said, hey, listen, we keep talking about the situation of Latinos in Minnesota, education, healthcare, and all the things, and it seems that we don't improve. So first, we are so diverse as community, so diverse. Mexicans are the largest Latino community in Minnesota. You guys know who's the second one, the second largest? The second Latinos? Puerto Ricans. Puerto Ricans. Puerto Ricans are the second largest. Now, you wouldn't know if I'm Puerto Rican or not. If I go and look for my driver license and I'm Puerto Rican, guess what questions they will ask me? Do you have papers? Puerto Ricans, it is under the United States, but people oftentimes are asked, do you have papers? And so, but those are some of the things where, to some people, we all are Mexicans, right? We love Mexicans, we love Mexican community, obviously. But we are put in that box where if you look this way, you are this. In any case, so the idea was, we are part of this, what I feel so proud, part of this large Latino community that goes from Mexico all the way to Chile, and we speak the Spanish in many different ways, the Caribbean as well. We have a lot of things in common, but we have a lot of things that are not so common because we see the world from different perspectives. But we have a lot of things in common in what means for us to live better. We cross borders, or you come from wherever you come, to live better. And so with that thing in mind, our conversation back then in 2017 was like, how do we vision our community 10, 15, 20 years from now? If the indicators are telling us this, what do you think is going to happen 30 years from now? What can we do? Can we begin by developing a vision? What does it mean to be Latino in Minnesota, for instance, when policies in place are not or have not been in our favor? And so from there were the conversations that we were having. I put over there on the table some of the strategic plan that we have been developing as we have been creating the organization. But the simple thing was at the end of the day, I think you, me, and everybody else wants to live a dignified life. That's what we want. And so with that, and then what do we say that we need to do? And that's where we have developed a set of strategies, a lot of civic engagement. The organization has these two wings. One is what we call a hybrid model, where we understand that human services is needed, but we understand that it's not sufficient. We understand that civic engagement is essential because it's a way that we can see the world and the possibilities of transforming those systems that are not working in our favor. One other element is the concept of building power, collective power, as the engine that can help us to be where we want to be. Building power is essential. How do we build that? We have been exploring different ways. We built electoral power. We built different ways in which we understand that Francisco alone, as a one person, doesn't have much. Have some, but not sufficient. But when we in this room, for instance, we put our forces together, we unify a vision, then we are developing that collective power, how we can use it responsibly so we can achieve our goals. And that's where this organization is about, the possibility of framing or rethinking a Minnesota where you and I I don't have to be the Latino who still thinks. I can be the person who can contribute, and that's what we're hoping to build.
Rosemarie.
How do I follow that? I'm scared. I was fascinated. I'm like, I could listen to you talk forever. Thank you. Rosemarie Dupuechi. I am the Chief Advancement and Marketing Officer for Women Venture. A lot of words. Basically, I raise money, and I write a lot, and I speak a lot. Why do I do what I do? I'm an immigrant, first-generation college graduate. My parents left us 4 kids from age 5 to 11 in Jamaica, Yaman, to come to the United States for economic opportunity. They were not running from war, although it was pretty scary where we lived in Jamaica, but they wanted to come to give their children an opportunity. They left us 4 kids for 5 years. 5 years. My mom still cries about it. We didn't. We thought it was like really fun, right? Because we just saw that plane going over that hill, Warwick Hill, and we're like, Mom's going to America and it's over the hill. We didn't know where that was. That's why I do what I believe in economic security. I believe in economic opportunity for everyone. I believe that building wealth for women especially, but for everyone, gives you a sense of freedom. And I'm an evangelical about that. Not only am I in this role at Women Venture, but I too am an entrepreneur. I'm a corporate refugee. I jumped in 2014 from a little company called Cargill. I was terrified, right? No, I didn't get fired. They didn't ask me to leave. I actually walked in one day to my boss and I told him, I want to talk to you. And he looks at me like, what? I said, we need a private room. He says, what? And I went in and I said, I quit. And his jaw fell. Why? Because I was like the only Black person, a Black woman in that role. I was a senior national account advisor, and they wanted me to stay. But I thought if I could raise money for Cargill, I can do it for myself. Well, I took a course at a little place called Women Venture in 2014, where I am now today on staff. I still run a business. I'm still an entrepreneur. I have my own business. But it launched me. It gave me the security of peers to say you're not alone, right? Just because I was raising millions of dollars for a large corporation did not mean that I know how to run my own business. In fact, I didn't. Year 2, I sat on my couch bawling like a baby. I'd made a terrible mistake, I thought. I need to go and beg for my job back. My husband snapped me out of it quickly. He's like, but I kept pushing, right? But what I found is that with a women venture organization like Women Venture, where we will give loans as low as $500. Maybe you just need a laptop. Maybe you just need a computer to get started, right? Maybe you just need a circle of other women who tell you can do it. Do not go back to that job. You can do it, right? That's why we exist. That's why I do what I do. I want every woman to be empowered to make her own future, to create her own destiny. That's why I do what I do.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'll have a few more questions, but I also want people in the audience to know that we have an opportunity for you to submit questions as well. If you can scan that barcode, and we'll collect some of those questions as well. Now I want to just get a little more focused, and again, I'll start with Emily, and we're talking about how do you view, what is it specific about your program that really does focus on kind of economic mobility or economic justice? You all do a variety of other types of programming that all relates to the issues of justice. But can you just give us kind of that high-level profile of how you see that working here at All Square?
Yeah, I mean, I think, when you ask the question of what does economic mobility mean to us, I think a big piece of it is choice. And one thing that certainly we know is if you have a criminal record, your choices are extremely limited. And that affects how you move, where you live, if you can see your kids, if you can go on school trips with your kids, if you can access certain jobs, if you can access certain types of education. So I think for us, what economic mobility means is a few different things. One, I think it's addressing that, right? And I think that at its heart, All Square is hopefully part of the collective narrative shift of when folks have come home, they're free to move forward, and we have to support them in doing that. So I think the way that we're doing that piece is, of course, one, practicing what we preach. We have our fellowship program that runs through our grilled cheese restaurant and food truck. I hope you guys got a little bit of a chance to sample some of that magic. We love grilled cheese around here. But that's for us just a way to say, if we can do it, you can do it. And there's really, I think, the fear that comes with having a criminal record is extremely misguided. Of course, it's anchored in all sorts of things, including misperceptions and often racism. So that's one piece. I think the other piece of how we're really focused on economic mobility is really looking at how can we be a part of opening up access to wealth accumulation and positions of power. And we're doing that through, I think, predominantly through our legal arm, which is called the Legal Revolution. And the notion of the Legal Revolution is we want to put the keys to the law in the hands of those who've been most impacted by the law. As someone who has seen from jailhouse attorneys and learned from jailhouse attorneys my whole career, what I know is who better to help us heal, not that they should have to, but should they want to. There's people studying the law in prisons all across America today, right now. And they're doing it for different reasons than I ever did it, but they are learning and mastering the law, and they have invaluable insights that we need in our legal discipline. And on top of that, right, you're talking about the law. You're talking about access to decision-making. You're talking about access to generational wealth, depending on the area of law that you pursue. And I think what we're really excited about is really we got really comfortable, I think, as a society of folks who've been impacted by the law being relegated to the role of a client. And even though we're so in honor of clients and know that they have all the dignity in the world, we're also excited about thinking about those who've been impacted by the law as judges, as attorneys, as legal practitioners who are able to look at their clients and say, I don't just care and I don't just understand the law, but I've been there. I understand what it's like to take a plea deal. I understand what it's like to have my liberty affected by legal systems and legal outcomes. So I think for us, that's been a big piece of when we look at mobility as opposed to justice. We're really excited about what that arm has the ability to do.
So maybe I'm putting you on the spot, but I know you have some very impressive numbers. I don't know if you want to highlight kind of what that work looks like, what it translates to the number of individuals that have been impacted by this work.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think so. Thanks to the Minneapolis Foundation in large part, who took a big risk on us. They were the first Minneapolis Foundation. Joanne, of course. RT, you were right. All the love. This one right here. We hadn't opened our doors yet. All Square was just an idea. It was something. But I think you guys saw something there, and we deeply value it. Since we've opened, we've been really thrilled. In the last 5 years, we've offered 56 fellowships to folks who've been impacted by the prison system, which entails a year-long here at All Square, working in the restaurant or food truck, and a lot of entrepreneurial investment. The Minnesota Vikings seeded a $250,000 fund where fellows who graduate are able to get their debt alleviated, which again is a big barrier reduction, and also sort of jumpstart their own entrepreneurial ventures, which has been a gift. On the legal side, I think at this point, we've been open about 2 years. We're incredibly proud to say that we, in partnership with so many amazing community leaders and Mitchell Hamlin Law School and North Hennepin Paralegal School and the Minnesota Department of Corrections, we are partnering with the prisons. It's true. It was new for us, but we are facilitating the first law degrees in prisons here in Minnesota. So currently there are 2 folks going to law school from prison, and we just found out that 2 more will be starting in August at Mitchell Hamlin. And one formerly incarcerated individual who spent about 21 years who will be going to Northwestern Law School in Chicago. So a little bit outside of Minnesota, but we're really stoked about that. I think the legal arm in particular, we've had 15 paralegals, now 6 JD scholars, and at this point, over 200 clients in the law firm who we've been able to support in getting an expungement or a pardon or a commutation, which I think for us, again, it's back to that, like, we know these records are haunting folks. We know that a lot of folks who have records shouldn't have them. And we're just so honored to be a part of trying to get to that root cause of what is preventing often the economic mobility. So thank you for the question.
All right, Francisco. No, Gopal does many, many things too. And you talked about the stuff that you've done with organizing. We recently are a grantee for voter engagement for nonpartisan participation. But if you could, how do you view kind of the economic justice or economic mobility that is part of your work?
Sure. So the organization, and again, I put some plans on the table so you can see them. And we also had what we call the HEMES principles for community organizing. We use those principles to build relationships. So, being an immigrant is like a moving target. So I've told you about myself without papers. Eventually, I was able to get some papers and became citizen. The concept of migration, and it's interesting that how it's perceived. I recently wrote something about how progressive Minnesota is in many, many things. But when it's about immigrants, it joins the national discourse about the feelings about immigrants and the fear of what an immigrant or someone who doesn't look like the average person in Minnesota can do here. And the biases that exist, right? So now the most recent one is that we want to steal jobs from African Americans, right? But those things have an impact on how other people perceive us. So I don't know how many of you have a driver license. You don't even think about driver licenses, you just get it. It's the privilege of having access to things that you don't even think about it. But that piece of paper, that card, in 2003 was removed under the concept that by removing that from people without papers, they will stop coming to Minnesota. That was removed. Also, when you remove something, if I wanna participate in elections, I need to bring or build a monster out of someone so you can select me because I want to save you from that monster. So our communities became that boogeyman that you need to use to win elections. And so back then, that was moved. It took us 20 years, and Senator Mohammed, who I don't know if he's still here, she was so crucial in getting that back. Now, what a driver license meant, according to some studies, the person who was able to regain that driver license, the family is going to earn an extra $5,000 because of the ability to figure out or getting more jobs. In addition, 20 years. So if I was here 20 years ago or 30 years ago when I came, 34 years ago, imagine that I have a child and I didn't have a driver license. So my kids wouldn't have had the opportunity that some of your kids would have to soccer practice, to enjoy this, to meet friends because I wouldn't have a driver license. Or if I drove, the possibility of me being deported existed. We don't have ideas yet how many people were deported or how many kids will end up following their parents because of a driver license. So it took us 20 years to put that back. And the benefits that not only that immigrant family have, but the kids of those immigrant families who were born here, who didn't have opportunities. And if you have a child that don't have those opportunities, 20 years later, is going to be a child that is going to be here and it's not going to be the asset that we need in this community, especially when we need talented people to do different jobs. So that is this investment in our own community by policymakers who use something that it was so, it's just the ability to to operate a motor vehicle. So policy, vision, and all those aspects put some communities behind, and that was one example. Recently, we have the organization. And by the way, the first investment we got into this organization came from the Minneapolis Foundation, by the way. And so now we are almost a $4 million organization with 34 employees. And thanks to the Minneapolis Foundation for believing that we were able to do that. We have presence in Mankato. We have an office in Mankato and Rochester. We are building the Latino Center for Community Engagement on 29th and Lake Street. We purchased the Raleigh Auto Store that was damaged during the uprising. We got rid of the building, and we have there where the building is going to go, with the idea that we want our community to becoming, continuously becoming agents of system change. It's when I do involve in the community, it's when I change the community. So the most recent thing that we have done is about ITINs. How many of you know that word ITIN? I-T-I-N. Some of you know that ITIN? Okay. How many of you knows what a social security number is? I mean, it's similar. So pretty much anyone who opened a business can use an ITIN, to request an ITIN to open a business. So what happened now is that we have a number of people that are still, the estimation is that there are about 90,000 people without documents in Minnesota. Out of 350,000 Latinos, we are 6% of the population. We are projected to become 10% of the population by the end of this, by 2030. And we do have the youngest population in the state. So average age is 25. So imagine that. 25 average age, 10% by 2030, and there is no investment. What is the consequence for the state of Minnesota? Not just for the family, but for the state of Minnesota. So with all those things, we realized one situation, that some of the parents who do not have documents are using ITINs. It's something that IRS give to people. You don't have papers, you can pay taxes, use an ITIN. IRS is totally aware of people who don't have documents because they are paying taxes using the ITIN numbers. In the process, we became aware that ITIN can be utilized for many things. Do your taxes. Recently, the governor made ITINs, or there was legislation that was passed that if you have a child and you have an ITIN, you can have that child credit. And we were exploring with someone in Mankato. One of the leaders in Mankato said, you know, people from the government come to tell us about how many millions are going to put in housing. We honestly don't see how that trickle down because we don't have access to housing. Housing is a big issue, as we know. And then we began digging and we spoke about ITINs. And we thought, what happened if we ask someone to introduce legislation about ITINs and use it as a tool for renting an apartment? If you don't have a social security number, you cannot rent an apartment. If someone lets you rent an apartment, it's because knows that you don't have documents and is not going to fix up your apartment, or it's going to charge you more. And if you live in greater Minnesota, you are in big trouble. So we did that, and we passed that. In the process, we find out that we had students going to St. Thomas University who couldn't get their FAFSA application on time because there was some changes in the system, and ITINs, for parents with ITINs, was an issue. We had some young people who were in college who came to testify in favor of ITIN and telling the story how bad their housing situation was because their parents couldn't afford an apartment. So when you think about mobility, for some of us, it is so basic: a driver license, an ITIN number. Once you get that, and now that, for instance, in Minnesota, if you get sick, you at least can say, hey, I'm sick, I cannot go to work. We have a large number of people working in the service industry who had to select between paying rent or showing up to work sick, which is not good for no one. So those are the situations that our community is in. And some of the work that we do is like, number one, how do we ensure that we have legislation that benefits our community, especially the people who are less protected? And number two, how do we ensure that people knows about those laws? So that's what we're doing, especially now, for instance, with the paid family leave. We know that a lot of women in our communities, especially, if they don't know that the law exists, employers are not gonna tell them. So those are some of the things that look so basic. I will say one thing. I was so lucky to work for a nonprofit where I learned about putting money aside for retirement. Many of our community members migrate. We do the tough work. We hold so many jobs, 2, 3 jobs. We don't know how to save because that is not part of what we know. And then we go back to poverty. So those are some of the things that we have ahead of us that we need to keep thinking. How do we ensure that putting money, first you need to earn enough money to be able to pay your things, and then you can put money aside because earning is part of it. But those are some of the things that we are working on and trying to figure out how we move the needle of why our community is in poverty, what are the conditions. We understand that there are some personal choices, but it's not only about personal choices, it's about systemic issues. And then trying to figure out from there how we support our community to achieve that greater good.
Thank you. Rosemarie, I'll talk about Women Venture and kind of how you see that work really advancing economic mobility.
So I chuckle a little bit when you talked about having more than one job. Because in the Jamaican community, if you only have one job, you're lazy. It's a little in joke in Jamaica. You only have one job? What? Economic justice. I talked about this earlier. Economic justice is crucial. Access to capital creates economic justice. Women get turned down at a very high rate when they go to a bank to get a loan for a business. Why? Because they don't have collateral, right? They don't have a business plan. Why? They don't have a nice spreadsheet that shows how they're going to make money, right? And so they're afraid to go to the big banks to get that idea funded, right? That they've been doing in their kitchen, or they've been doing, in their side hustle, and they want to turn it into something real. When they come to Women Venture, they get heard. We listen to them. We listen to their stories of what they've been doing. They've been selling to their parents and parents' friends and their cousins, right? They've been making money, right? So we say, okay, you have been making money. Now let's sit down and put that on paper. And we work with them to do that, right? We don't turn them away. That is security, right? That gives them economic freedom. And I was looking at some of our stories. We just gave a loan to Frahia, who just got into the long-haul trucking business, a woman, an immigrant, right? Had she gone to a bank, they would have laughed her out the door, right? But she came to us and we said, come on in. We'll listen to you. So you know what? What is your projection? She's, I said, you know it. You just don't have it written down. You know it. So we work with her to get that down. We business consulting, right? We say, okay, we have a course called Getting Ready that will give you that foundation. Put a business plan on paper, 1 page. You don't need 20 pages for a business plan. 1 page, right? Your projection is basically what you're selling it for, and then what you project to sell and how many you want to sell. We work with her to do that. And then once she gets the loan from us, we work with her so she pays it back. Building credit is hugely important. Hugely important. So we look at ourselves as a way to get immigrants, women, entrepreneurs, to grow credit, build credit, and sustain credit. So that when they are ready to go to the bigger banks, who will now say yes, right? Because it's in their business model to do that, they will get that loan. But they can start with Women Venture. We do loans from $500 up to $100,000 at a lower interest rate than the banks. Why? Because we can take on that risk. As a nonprofit with our situation, we can take on that risk. And that's the way, that's for us, the path to economic justice and economic security.
Thank you. So we just have a few minutes left, and there was one question that has come forward in talking about what type of strategies or successes that you've seen that have helped to advance your work. And I know, Francisco, you listed a whole bunch. So I'm going to start with Rosemary this time when you're talking about those strategies, and then we'll go back down the line.
Strategies for success for Women Venture. So we have, we've been around, this is our 46th year. We actually started as an organization that helped women transition to the workplace. That's how Women Venture started. Teaching women how to write resumes, how to do interviews, how to write that thank you letter after the interview. Think about that. 45 years ago, that's how Women Venture got started. To where today we're saying, no, you do the hiring, right? You do the interviewing. You determine your economic future. So how do we look about ensuring our success and being able to help more women and create more entrepreneurs? Because entrepreneurs are the lifeblood of this country. We are the economic engine of this country. Yes, they're the Cargills of the world and the Fords and the Target. Those are important companies too, don't get me wrong. But I pay taxes. I hire people, right? What we do is we really try to reach out and tell our story. And we found that to be very effective. And so I thank you for inviting us to this. That we tell the story of Frahia. We tell the story of Vanessa Drews, of Cheesecake Funk. If you haven't had Cheesecake Funk, please go out and get Cheesecake Funk. She's in Crave now. She's in Crave now, right? She started we gave her that loan to start that business, right? We tell our story. And we've just started doing advocacy at the Capitol, right? We've never done that before, right? To actually get direct appropriation, which we have never done before, right? We're also telling our story so that we get grants to make loans versus getting a loan to make a loan, right? That's the next avenue that I'm looking into, right? Because we want to make more loans. We want to do revolving loans for our entrepreneurs. So we have been successful in terms of reaching out to individuals, making our case at the Capitol, making our case with foundations to say we are helping people build our community and help our communities to thrive. And we're showing the story. We're showing what we're doing. And so that's really how we are determining, and we're keeping our story alive and helping entrepreneurs.
I do want to mention that we had a conversation with Women Venture and with Rosemary, asking them to consider a loan from the Minneapolis Foundation through our Invest Minneapolis Fund. They didn't jump on it right away for the reasons that you're saying. They would prefer to have grants, but by offering again very low interest loans, they decided to take a bet with us and see how that works out. So
Joan was very convincing.
Joan's very convincing. Emily.
Yeah, I mean, I think two strategies come to mind right away for me. One, I think we've been trying to be really strategic with earned revenue. I think that's been vitally important for us, and I will speak for myself in saying that, I think often many of us, myself included, forget that nonprofits are businesses. We are charged with some of the most vital social work in the country. Is my opinion, we should be paid double for our work instead of underpaid, notably. But we are businesses, and so I think it is upon us to be thinking about how do we strike that really, really delicate balance between building effective, powerful social programs that have catalytic change, while also building a model that can sustain and grow that change. So that's been something that's been really vital to us is how do we start thinking about, of course, we're going to leverage philanthropy. We could not do our work without that. But there's not a ton of financial predictability in that. And so it's been really important for us to be thinking about how do we over time not only maintain, but start to convert to a stronger earned revenue model that helps us with some of that financial predictability, especially since, a third, almost now, at this point, it's almost higher than that, of our staff is formally incarcerated, including leadership. So we've got a lot of people depending on this to be stable and to grow over time. And so it's on us to do that. I think the other strategy that we're really deploying and has come to bear with the legal revolution arm is relationships across into spaces that we wouldn't have traditionally done it. I think what we're doing with our legal arm is indicative of, as I mentioned, never in a million years did I think, with plenty of critiques of the federal government and plenty of critiques of the prison system, that we would be in partnership with the Commissioner of Corrections and in partnership with the DOC. But I think for us, it's been really important to pull in law firms, to pull in bar associations, to pull in the American Bar Association itself, to pull in the prison, and to come together to say, we can't, if we're going to try to do this legal thing, we can't do it in a silo. We need everyone to be on board, and we want everyone to be excited about welcoming legal experts who have this lived experience. But we can't have the only law firm that's doing that. So it's been really special, I think, for us, and I'll say for me, to really challenge what misconceptions I might have about the appetite in something like a prison system, or the appetite with private law firms to really get on board with social change and collaborating in this way. So it's been a really healthy, and I think it's inspired us in many ways, I think, because we're at a time where relationships, particularly across aisles, it's really hard.
Francisco.
So, so in the building the organization, we're a 6 years old organization, so we are kind of pretty young in that way. So think about vision, programming, the people who carry that on that vision, the money that is needed to carry on programming the vision, and the people investing. Without a vision, you are just going in circles. And so supporting my team to have the capacity to reimagine the things that we haven't seen yet. And that is, I believe in some moments of education, we lose that capacity to think beyond. Either we become too comfy, or we don't want to take risk. Business is a risk. But the ability to think the things that are not, that don't exist. So that has been one key practice that we keep aiming our team to keep thinking. But the other thing is capacity. Building the capacity of my own team is so essential, especially when investment hasn't existed. And when, for instance, when we post a position about we want an environmental justice that is bilingual, no one shows up saying, I am that person. We need to build that capacity. Because there hasn't been any investments in our own communities to build those capacities. So recently, I came speaking with someone who leads an important portion of our work, and all of a sudden was in my own thing about education. So what university do you go? She didn't respond. I was like, what university? Where you graduated from? She was a little bit shy and said, well, I have only done 4th grade. Oh, okay. So, but we strongly believe that many of us are where we are because we haven't had the opportunities, right? It's all opportunities, that's it. Give the person an opportunity, that person can do a lot of things. That's what you do, that's what we do, that's what you want to do. So part of our thing is, for instance, we are going through a process of what we call the leadership team, and looking for some of them to attend Humphrey Institute, even the person who is in 4th grade, because we want them to have the opportunity that there is 2 things that I think are key. One is to have the technical ability to get the job done. The second thing is to have the vision that imagination to get us where we need to be. And understanding that my life has a cycle as well that I need to step down of eventually, and that somebody else needs to take on. So those are some of the things that we are trying to do while we do the work that needs to happen. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Can we please acknowledge the fine work of all three of these organizations? I started off mentioning that one of our values at the Minneapolis Foundation is being proximate. And this is hopefully giving you that opportunity to get a sense of what proximate means. I also hope that you recognize the complexity that each of these organizations hold in their hands in order to do this work. This isn't a straight line. And hearing their stories and part of their voices and the work that they do really is our role that we have as a foundation to be able to support that and really acknowledge that without these individuals on the ground, we're not fulfilling our mission here at the Minneapolis Foundation. So I'm going to turn it over to RT to do a closeout. No? The script says RT will do a closeout. All right, Maggie?
So I know we want to leave time for RT to close us out, but I want to throw a few things your way. So here's one. Here's one. Emily, how possible is it for someone with a law degree passing the bar exam score and a criminal record to be licensed as an attorney in Minnesota?
I mean, there's precedence for it, which is a great thing. It's a great start. There's actually a judge here in Minnesota who had a felony record, attended law school, and is now actively had passed the bar. But that was a huge consideration for us, is if we're going to launch this legal effort, we got to make sure that we think through all the things, including licensure and sitting for the bar. So I think, we're luckily on the sort of beginning stage of our Juris Doctorate program where our scholars who are on the inside are in their second year of 4 years. It's 4 years since they're in the prisons and they can't attend quite as regularly. So the next 2 years, that's a huge piece for us, is working with folks, working with the judiciary at sort of looking at the character and fitness portion of the bar exam. I know that there's been some amazing movement here in Minnesota to start to re-examine what that bar exam looks like and what it looks like to sit for it. And I think we feel really hopeful, both with Minnesota and nationally in other states that we intend to exist in, that we can make significant traction there. The last thing I'll say is, as a sort of a fail-proof that we're developing, is our law firm is prototyping how to employ Juris Doctorate graduates that may not be licensed. At the end of the day, there's a whole lot that you can do with a Juris Doctorate degree that you might not be able to, that you have to do it, have to have a license to actually litigate, sign petitions. But beyond that, if you're working under a licensed attorney, there's really not much that you can't do. So I think that's a worst case scenario for us, is we're also committed to prototyping that in the worst case scenario, folks can't sit for the bar and get licensed. How can we still make sure that we get to bring their talent and expertise into our law firms?
That's great. So we're not going to get to all these questions, but I wanted to let you know that as next steps, everybody will get an email, and we'll really work with you as panelists to get some of the answers to the questions. There's a fun one about why grilled cheese, Emily, but don't answer it just yet. And so with that, I will let RT come up and close us out.
Well, thank you, everyone, for being here. First off, can we have a round of applause for these people who are out doing great work? Thank you. So often when you're thinking about a foundation, you're thinking about us going out and putting money out that helps individuals. In the middle of that are these amazing nonprofits that we've been investing in for years. We want you to, too. I want to finish by going back to where we began. With the discretionary dollars we have, we do equity and justice in 3 areas: education, economic mobility, and the environment. This is the second of a 3-part series that will go over each of those. All of these will be on our website, so the first thing you can do is forward that to others. Patrice led the education one about a month ago, and that will be there. This one is there. And then in the fall, we have a really great event coming up that'll focus on our environmental work, which will include 2 things. Number one, a very large body of work we're doing on water. Minneapolis, Minnesota. Water is in our name. Water is the center. Water is a critical issue right now. That will be half of the event. The other half is a remarkable opportunity we have been given. We received a $35 million grant from the Environmental Protection Agency to do environmental justice work across the Great Lakes. We're going to bring that together in an event called the Minnesota Meeting. I don't know if anyone remembers that title. That is a community gathering that we used to have every year in this community to forward big issues. We are going to bring back the Minnesota Meeting, and so this will be a very large meeting that will bring a lot of players together. When you do that, the final point I want to make is to look right over your shoulder there, cultivating change together. All of our work is about that. We cultivate. We don't arrive in a community and say we have all the answers any more than a gardener should walk in and simply plant plants that they buy at a garden store somewhere. You look at the soil, you understand what the assets are, and then you cultivate them to remove barriers, to put in assets, but recognize community has assets. Change is mandatory right now. We cannot accept the gaps in this community. And the final point is together. No one of us can solve all of this, even these brilliant people, even Joanne or Patrice, all of this, you're great guys, but none of us can do it all together. And so what we really want to do is to bring those of you who care about this community to recognize 1 + 1 is 3. We cultivate change together. If you have a fund with us, work with your fund holder. If you don't, come to our events no matter what. Circulate this video. Bring others the amazing information we got here, and let's all cultivate change together.